Good afternoon, folks. It's about 1 or 2 minutes before 2 o'clock here, so we'll start our Mailers Hub webinar for the afternoon in a couple of minutes. Stay tuned. Well, I think we better get started today. It's a little after 2, and I think everybody is going to be on is going to be on. So I want to welcome everyone to today's Mailers Hub webinar on mail disruption, what's going to happen next. And it's something which we're privileged to do with our two colleagues, Tom Glassman and Dale Kennedy. Dale and Tom both work on MTAC work groups. They've worked together on this presentation on the issues it represents. So we're very pleased to have them speaking to us today. Dale, of course, is a veteran of the Postal Service of decades of service, and someone that I've always found to be very responsive to the needs of the mailing community. He's now working in mailing standards, my old stomping ground many years ago, and he is more than qualified to deal with that issue, to deal with that area because of his background relating to customers and to commercial mailing. Dale is one of those people that you have on your short list to go to because he's always been a more than reliable source for answers and help on matters small and great. Tom Glassman, as many of you know, is an industry resource almost without comparison. Tom has decades of experience, has managed plants, is our MTAC rep, and is currently working at Ricoh, where he is providing support for their customers. Tom and Dale will talk today about the issues about mail disruption because of the current circumstances. If any of you have any questions, please pose your questions, and I'll try to keep an eye on that and ask our speakers those questions as they come up. Just as a reminder, there is a copy of the handout which you can see in the lower right of your screen there. That's a copy of today's slides, if you'd like to have that, and a copy of the recording of today's presentation will be available to our subscribers after it renders, after it's finished. Also, this weekend is the issue of Mailers Hub News. That'll be coming out, and that has a lot of information. It's going to be a substantially larger issue than normal, with a lot of information. And as you'll hear later on today, of course, we also have a good deal of information on our website at the COVID-19 page, which you can access under the About Us tab. So without any further ado or commercials, please, Tom, please, Dale, go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Leo. I appreciate it. So one of the things that drove us to this presentation today was Leo the other night called and said, why am I getting all of these alerts from the Postal Service? And I said, well, you can blame me and Dale. So I've worked with Dale for a long time. I've always looked up to Dale, not because of his reputation, because I'm 5'3" and Dale is over 6 foot. So I'm constantly looking up at Dale. So there have been work groups and task teams, and I want to share the information with the goal being, how can the MSPs communicate with their customers, and where can they find the latest information, and why did we get to that point? So next slide, please, Michelle. Thank you. And if you could close that and just let me take over, Sharon, I'd appreciate it. And I'm assuming everyone can see my screen. Leo or Dale?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So the post office has a wonderful tool from Jim Wilson, the geospatial mapping. And this is how, when I was running data and post services at Weiland, how I could tell where I wanted to delay or stall the mail. So within the deck, you'll have the link to this map. This map will show every facility in the United States. You can tell right now where the red circles are. And again, there's a content, a legend. So the circles are offices, and you'll see the squares would be plants, which I'll bring up as we drill in. And this is not abnormal to have this many offices closed. These are the cases where flooding has caused issues. A car has run through the front of the building, which has caused issues. And if you click on a specific office, it'll tell you what it is, why it's closed, and where the mail is being directed to. So this one's closed due to a structural issue, and the mail is being sent over to a new zip code. As you drill down, you'll start to see squares. The squares are the processing plants, and then underneath my bar on the top right, I can layer FEMA, I can layer the weather service. As you can see, there's a tornado alert in the Nashville area right here. Storm fronts going through. And if you notice, there are no plants that are closed. So this is an important tool. If you're looking at planning mail, or a customer calls and says what's going on to a specific portion of the country, this is where I go to find out. Jim's team does a great job of keeping this current. And again, the circles are offices, the squares are plants, and you'll have, as I drill down, I'm going to go into the Jacksonville area. Mail processing. So I'm not on the NBC, but I'm on the PDC. So again, great tool. A couple years ago, where the hurricanes actually were on the coast of Florida, there were red dots right up the middle of Florida where microbursts had taken out power. So I delayed the mail being delivered in that area from our plant for 3 days so that they could get the power up and running. And again, I was managing delivery of loads to drop shipments based on this map. Michelle, can you bring us back to the slideshow, please? And again, the intent of the webinar is so that you can find resources on your own.
Tom, I'd like before we move to the next slide, I'd like to add to what Tom has said here, that we're constantly looking, or when I say we, the Postal Service, at new ways to demonstrate, share mail, share information, and roll out new things to you. The geospatial map that Tom has showed you was something new that we added a few years ago. And then every time we have a storm, we learn a new lesson. Jim's able to adapt it a little bit more, and it becomes a much more useful tool. So the process of revising what we're currently doing is an ongoing process. It's always in play.
Great point, Dylan. Thank you. Michelle, next slide, please. So the next area, before we get into the work groups and task teams, the next area to look at would be on the USPS site, related links, mail service disruption report. And if you could go to the next slide. If you don't like the map, there is an Excel sheet. Some of the vendors actually import the sheet into their system to flag records based on the zip codes. So again, if you don't like the map, I'm a visual person, so I love the map. There is an Excel spreadsheet that will show the office, the reason for the closure, if the mail is being diverted to another area, another post office, like Ashland, Massachusetts, the facility is being rejuvenated. A lot of construction, so they've moved the mail to Hopkinton, Massachusetts. So that information would be listed here, and along with the reason and what services. So if the PO boxes or the lobby is still open, the notation would be there. If they're not accepting mail at the dock, again, the X would be there. And just as a note, this is a byproduct from a work group so that we could provide the industry more information and more specific information. Again, it was developing as we went along. Dale, anything to add with the disruption report?
Just would offer that, there are multiple different ways to digest this information, whether you're, like Tom said, visually oriented for the map. Some people like the spreadsheet. Some people like to see the verbiage that is associated with it, which is where you could link to that on the previous slide. So, we try to offer it as many ways as possible so that you find the way that works best for you. That's it for now, Tom.
Okay.
Hey guys, I got a question. Is there an API to connect to and get the map and spreadsheet info on the geospatial map and the disruption report?
So the Excel sheet can be downloaded, but the map is just a link to the map. Jim Wilson's not going to have access to that map or allow access to the map.
Okay.
Next slide, please. So again, I'm trying to build a foundation so that you can find the current information, which is at the end related to the current virus situation. And by the way, to the best of my knowledge, there are no plants or processing facilities that are down or impaired due to the virus. Postal's done a great job of keeping the system up and running. So we started with work group 187, and we talked about mail disruption and how could we keep the public informed. So getting back to Leo's original question, when he called me and wanted to know why he's getting all these alerts, when there is a sustained disruption, so for instance, during the Houston roof collapse, during a hurricane, during a period where a wide path of mail delivery area has been disrupted, possibly by tornado. There is a regular update, so you'll see the alerts coming out at around 11 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 6 o'clock. And it's going to provide a ton of information. And please don't forget, that information starts at the local level, then comes up from district, area, and then national. So we're collecting the data from the local sites. It's being rolled up to district, then area, so that input can be added. So for instance, during the recent roof collapse, the local area called in the engineers. They dealt with area, district, and area. They defined where they could move the mail to. And then again, at the national level, that information was communicated back out to the industry. So the alerts you're seeing, if it's a major disruption, will be again out at 11, 3, and 6. Next slide, please. What we found when we were meeting in the work group, there were different formats based on who issued the information, and we worked diligently with Dale and his team to come out with a standardized format. If you notice on the alerts, it'll have a specific zip code, and Dale came up with, which I thought was a great idea, because not everyone knows where the specific zip code is. So we talk about larger areas of land. So when we're talking about hurricane going through a zip code 33416, we can talk about the South Florida district, the West Palm Beach area, the Florida Keys are also mentioned within those alerts. Again, they did a great job of defining where the issues were and listing specifically the impact. We talk about, go ahead.
I was going to say, and what Tom is describing in terms of adding things into the industry alerts and the way things bubble up from the local, this happens for two different reasons. One is we want at our headquarters unit to support the local operations. They're the people that are on the ground dealing with the event and living with the event. And so we want to try to spread out the information as wide as we can to everybody so they know, and they don't have to call that local post office or that local plant to get updates. We want them to concentrate on nothing but first taking care of their employees, then taking care of their product, and returning operations to normal as fast as they can. So we take the responsibility for communications up to the headquarters level and work on it from there. I would also offer that whenever we have an event, one of the key things we do after the event is to do a review, an after-action review, and you learn different things from different types of events. I had the unfortunate pleasure to start working on these type of events back when Hurricane Katrina struck New Orleans, and we had 1.6 million people pick up and move overnight when the levees broke. That was one that we thought, well, man, there's nothing else we can face differently. Well, then we had tropical storms or Superstorm Sandy, where we had multiple plants, multiple post offices, widespread flooding in high population areas. Okay, we thought we had that. And then Tom and I had the distinct pleasure of working through storms about a couple of years ago where we had 3 major storms in a row affecting 3 different areas each time. And we thought that was very unique. So we learn from every event and we apply those learnings to what we're doing to improve our communications out to the industry and to the customers.
So, Tom and Dale, just to go back to where we probably started, if there were a situation with the current situation, if there were a plant or a post office that was impacted and had to be temporarily taken offline for some reason, that kind of circumstance would be reported to the public, to the mailing industry rather, on an industry alert, much like what we saw for Westchester.
Correct.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that's actually a good point. So Westchester came down immediately. The mail was redirected to drop shipments so that the fast schedulers would know where to send the mail. And then once the facility was sterilized and brought back up again, there's a lot taking place. So the mail goes back, but meanwhile, the mail.dat files are redirected and have the mail going into the wrong place. So there's a scrambling by the Postal One side to waive those errors or to at least look at those errors and not count them. So it's more than just moving the mail. There's a huge team behind that decision. So besides the physically moving of the mail, we've got to catch up within the FAST system and Postal One. So I just want to stress to everyone, it's not, when the mail is redirected, it's not a simple process. It's well thought out with a lot of teams working on it.
So Tom, in a situation like when you had like Westchester, or when we've had mercury spills at closed plants, what is the mailing company, the printer mailer, supposed to do to alert the Postal Service that there may be shipments in transit or shipments about to pull up to the dock, so that they know what's coming and can make changes, as you said, in Postal One to not have inadvertent errors reported?
So in a major event, there's notations made on the FAST bulletin board, the FAST access. So all of the major trucking companies, the schedulers go into FAST. Decision was made in the task team work group to communicate with the redirection of those trailers, of that mail, through the FAST site as opposed to other means. So Postal One alert would go out, an immediate redirecting of that mail would happen within FAST. So typically the trucking companies would know before everyone else, although the alert is sent out simultaneously.
And that same process would result in errors not being attributed to the mailer because of the difference in where the mail is entered.
Correct. So what may happen in the case of Houston, the errors show up and they're just ignored by BMS, Business Mailer Support, because I had a long talk with Randy Workman about that around that event. So that's typically what would happen.
And one thing I'd like to point out here is that when we have an event like this, if you follow the Westchester event, the first thing that they did was they moved just marketing mail, flats, and letters. And then they decided that they needed to move basically all mail out of there because they were shutting down to clean the facility. And as they ramped back up, they brought the first class back into the plant, and then ultimately brought the marketing mail and everything. So when we have an event, there's going to be an ebb and a flow to it at the beginning and at the end, where we're updating those alerts, we're making changes, and you can follow. If you follow those alerts, you can see basically the whole recovery process in those alerts.
Hey, Dale, in case anyone on the call today doesn't already get industry alerts, what's the format for subscribing to those?
If they're interested in learning to be able to get the industry alerts, they can
Yeah.
send an email to industryfeedback.com. Industryfeedback@USPS.com or .gov, and that will just saying that they would like to sign up for the industry alerts, and we'll add them to our list.
Thanks. Okay, guys, sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
That's all right. And just as a note, we've got resources on our last slide. So we're handing this out, or say handing out electronically, and all the links are there on the last page. We'll get to that. Michelle, could you bring us up one more slide? So we closed out the work group, and then lo and behold, we had the event in Houston, Amelia, where it rained cats and dogs, as portrayed by my cats and dogs raining down. Postal did a wonderful job. I can't speak more highly on how network operations moved the mail and got everything. You're talking better than 4 million pieces a day processed over 7 or 8 facilities and then brought back into the Houston area for delivery. Representing the industry, I'm one of the co-leads for the Fast User Group. So during the event, I had trucking companies calling me, questioning what to do. I had some that I could actually picture on the phone jumping up and down as they were yelling and screaming at me, not realizing that I'm a basically industry volunteer. But Postal did logistically a great job. Communications, I thought, could be improved. So I went to Dale and MTAC leadership and said, we had issues, what can we do? So a task team was put together. We're at the final point where we're drawing to a conclusion. We're at the point where we're asking postal executives to endorse our recommendations and then move forward. So I wanted to talk about what happened with the Houston roof collapse and how, again, learning from the event, additional changes are being made to the system. So we had customers with mail en route for the Houston facility, and they didn't know what to do, as you just brought up, Leo, in your question. Industry, some of the industry folks were included in webinars. It wasn't broadcast nationally, and as most of you know, the logistics companies are typically national. So there was a lot of us that weren't included, although we invited ourselves to those phone calls. How do we engage, or how do we look at engaging and giving feedback to the full service customers? And then looking at where the gaps were and how could we inform our customers better and do a better job about that. So the goal of Task Team 31 was to look at the issues and see how we could close those gaps with recommendations. Bill, anything I left out in stating the problem?
No, I mean, when the issues started coming in from the industry, we immediately began the process of reviewing the steps that we had gone through. And with a critical eye, we reviewed them at the highest levels of the organization, and we came to identify that there were indeed gaps as the industry had shown us, and we started immediately trying to remedy those gaps. And then we engaged with the industry to make sure that those remedies were good and effective, and if there were additional remedies that were needed. So this is the type of process that we go through after every event. And one thing I'd like to add is work group 187 was not our first work group. We did one 155 with myself and Lisa Werman back in early 2011, 2012, somewhere in there. And then we did the one with 187, and then this time with the Task Team 31. So we're always going to be listening to the industry and and trying to identify their concerns and responding back to those.
Well, guys, since the current situation is a little bit more long-lasting, I guess, and a little more widespread than would be a weather event, could you give us a quick talk about the team that's been assembled at headquarters to really focus on how to manage the reaction, the response of the Postal Service, and what mailers should do as this whole thing unfolds?
I'm glad to. That's an excellent point, Leo. As I said earlier, each event that we go through is unique and has its own characteristics. And true to form, no two storms are the same, no two chemical spills are the same, and this pandemic is unlike anything that we've ever come from or had experienced previously. We have contingency plans for a wide variety of different things, and all the contingency plans are first about protecting our employees and then in doing that we protect our customers, we protect the mail, and then the contingency plans focus is to return the service to normal as quickly as possible. We take great pride in that. This current crisis is unique in that you do not see the clear path of destruction like you would in a hurricane or mass flooding or a tornado or even the wildfires. When we had the wildfires, it was very hit or miss. One day, an area could be in danger of fire. The next day, the wind changed and you had another office in danger. And that's kind of how it is a little bit with this coronavirus or COVID-19. Because we're not seeing where we have a huge impact in any of our facilities. Unfortunately, this virus strikes individuals, and then you have to react at that level, and then you look at the impact for the operation. And because, as Leo said, this is not a quick one and done, we have formed a special team to look at the responses for the coronavirus, making sure that we're following our processes, creating new processes. It's being led by Kristen Seaver, our Chief Information Officer, and she has day-to-day operations responsibility for the overall process. We have 4 other vice presidents involved in that. That they meet multiple times a day. They take the information, they push it to the Postmaster General and to the executive leadership team for decisions that cannot be made at the field level or the area level. And then we have plenty of resources assigned to them to help accomplish each specific task that needs to be done. We will continue using this, what we call the COVID command group, until the crisis is past and until things start getting back to normal. But by creating this COVID command group and then a work group underneath it, we're allowing the other management team to continue dealing with the other operations that are going on today, so we don't drop any balls and miss anything falling through the cracks.
Okay, thanks.
Michelle, next slide, please. So some of the things we looked at, the first issue we had was the mail was moved to a common hub or a focus area, which was the Dallas STC. I received calls immediately from fast schedulers that there was no NAS code or locale key. So as a outcome from that, Postal has identified all the facilities in the network. So everything, regardless if it's used or not used at this point, has a NAS code and a locale key. So again, as we learn from the different events, things are modified and changed almost immediately. The other thing is informed delivery. Informed delivery, I don't know if you're aware, because of the amount of emails, the databases for those addresses are basically managed on the local level. So for instance, my email address would be associated to 33916, South Florida. So when you go and move the mail, the equipment doesn't know there's an association. So again, we didn't think of this before, and these are the things that come out during these events that make us better for the next event. So we were looking at supplying SV scanners for knowing where the skids were, bringing IV and ID into the loop during the event so that data can be tracked and moved properly. So again, a lot of things are learning events during each event, and things are modified for future events. So, Dale, anything? Oh, there we go. Next slide. Thank you. Communications during the event was at the area level. We came back with a recommendation of managing the communications through industry engagement out of headquarters. The mailing alert list would be used for webinars. So if Kristen Sievert decided to do a webinar or repeat what was at MTAC from yesterday, they would use the mailing alert list, the email list, to notify everyone of the up and coming webinar. Any type of building change, any kind of drop, again, redirection of the mail will be posted on the FAST bulletin board for the schedulers that actually plan for the loads to go into the facilities. Next slide, please. So one of the things we wanted to find out about, and if you think about the content of the mail, not just your mail, there are credit cards that are being processed, Social Security checks being processed, people's meds in the mail. So one of the things we were looking at was how can we minimize our risk and make more data available to the industry of what's being affected by that closed facility. Again, this is not something that's going to happen overnight. Now, you can log into the IV portal and you can bring a range of skids in to see if they're in a specific facility. But our request from the industry to Postal is, what can we do to make more data available in an age of scan events and knowing where everything is? So again, this request has come out. We have spoken with IV. It's going to take some time to be able to mark the files with the weather event or the building event, or in this case, the virus event, and mark those delayed records with the event. Next slide. Unless, Dale, you want to add to?
No,
Okay.
what I want to say is that, we always are looking to expand the use of the data. In this particular case, one of the things that we want to do is, if you're a package shipper, you know that we've started appending weather events to packages to show that they may be delayed. And one of the things we want to use IV for is to be able to do the same thing with our letter in flat volume, so that in the future we can say that this grouping of mail may have been delayed or may be delayed because of the approaching storm or because of the storm activity in the area, and you'll be able to see that as you pull your own reports, or hopefully we can create a portable where you can go in and research to see exactly which pieces are still in the plant, maybe based on the last scan. So, so some of it will be push information, some of it will be pull information, but it's going to take some time for us to be able to work through that. As you can imagine, right now, everything we're doing right now is about the coronavirus and maintaining service during this time. So we haven't been able to put resources on that right now like we had intended to do. But we'll go back to that as soon as we get past this crisis.
Thanks, Dale. Can you speak about the checklist that is now at headquarters that's been implemented so that it's covering the IB/ID?
Yeah, one of the things that we did was to create a checklist because there are so many moving parts to the communications process, and we want to make sure that we've engaged all parts of the organization. So I created a checklist that lets me document when we notified somebody, or if we have decided this is going to be a long-term event, that we've decided to start holding webinars, or that we've sent out special alerts to different people. We can keep up with that, keep a record of that, so that it will make our reviews that much easier going forward. And Tom helped me during our task team 31 by saying that, you know, Dale, as much as we love you, ha ha ha, you're not always going to be there. So who handles that checklist if you're not there? So one of the things we did with the checklist was making sure we've got backup, that they can do this checklist for us if for some reason I'm out of pocket and not in position to be able to do the checklist. And this checklist was shared with the highest levels of the organization so that we've got that potential to be able to document when things happen, how they've happened, and we can track that history even better.
Good job. Thank you. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, some of the key components and different companies were represented within the task team is to gain visibility of meds, subsidy payments, Social Security payments, credit cards that are being mailed out in bulk by companies. And again, get this into the data. What is going on with the facility? Where is the mail at the time, and why it's delayed? So again, long-term goal, IB has added this to their project list, and it eventually would be out and available for downloading with irregular files.
Hey, Tom and Dale, I got a question came in here. Are there any ops or mods codes pushed to vendors that indicate these delays that you're talking about?
Currently, I was going to say no, but go ahead, Dale.
Yeah, the ops and mod codes, no, that would not tell anybody anything because they're pretty much standardized. What we're talking about is special attributes that we could append to the file that says that this was hurricane affected or this was virus affected. It would be just a flag in that record to say, hey, this is a potentially impacted piece. It'd be almost like a service type ID that we would append to the file to say this is the type of issue that we have.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, next slide. So getting specifically into the coronavirus, the post office has aligned all their guidelines with the CDC out of Atlanta. The information is available both on the CDC site, and Postal has posted most of that information. As we stated down the bottom, that post office is sharing the CDC guidelines. We're letting you know. Go ahead.
Let me expand on this a little bit, Tom, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
There are a lot of things that are happening here with the virus that aren't visible, that we're doing. For example, we have people on the White House FEMA call every day, listening to the other agencies. We're reacting to requests from the other agencies to help them accomplish their task and make sure that it doesn't inhibit our task. We've gone out and we've issued instructions to our employees that we are classified as essential personnel, so our people can continue to work even if there is a shelter-in-place record out there. But to make sure our people are safe, we also, like Tom said, we're following the CDC guidelines. We put out lots of safety information to tell them how to protect themselves while they're out. We have made different elements of like handy wipes, masks, gloves available to our employees so that they can use them if they choose to. At headquarters, we have allowed all of our employees here that can to telecommute. If you came to headquarters right now, you wouldn't find hardly anybody here. And we're trying to roll that out technology-wise with other administrative groups in the field. But that's all happening behind the scenes to support our efforts with this. Another new thing that we have added this time, many of you that have been in the industry for a while will remember when we've had events like the Super Bowl in Indianapolis a few years ago, when our plant, half of our plant was in the security zone. We had to change our operations around to be able to support that. When we had the Pope and visit all these different places on the East Coast, that impacted our operations. We communicated those in advance to our customers. With this event, you'll notice if you go to the USPS service alerts page, on there, there's a new document that's in there that's called the Continuity of Operations Update. We started putting out proactive messaging on certain policy changes that affect customers that are in response to their different questions. And we're actually creating an archive that should be up this afternoon so that when we put up a new one, the old one doesn't go away, that you can go back and pull the older updates that we've posted. And then finally, the other thing that we have done that's different in this case is if you look at the USPS service alerts page, underneath the traditional links for our residential customers and our business customers, there are some specific FAQ, frequently asked question links down there that we are updating daily based on the questions that are coming into us from the industry or from customers, and we're putting those out there daily to update them. So, you know, we're working very hard right now to maintain and communicate and keep the service going, keep the mail going, and we will continue to add to different things that we're doing and listening to your feedback.
One of the questions that I see here is one that I've heard many times over the past few weeks, and that is whether mail houses, mailing service providers, print service providers are considered essential businesses nationwide or state by state. And one of the things that we posted early along on our website, on our dedicated COVID-19 website, web page, was a letter from the Postal Service that expressed what I think most of us believe, and that is that, yes, the Postal Service and, of course, that whole chain, that whole supply chain, are considered essential services. There was also some information coming out from one of the federal agencies, and I can't think of the name of it right now, CISA, which we have on our website, which repeated the same perspective in a ruling that was issued by the state of New York. That was reflected there again. So for the most part, you know, this hasn't come up before probably for most people. So there may not be some sort of definitive legal, nationally binding statutory definition of whether anybody is essential, but I think it just makes sense that if the Postal Service is going to keep running as an essential service, it has to have something to deliver. And what it delivers, of course, is mail, and mail doesn't come out of the sky. So it has to be produced by mailing companies and printing companies. So therefore, the documents we've seen that say that mailers and printer mailers and so forth are essential services is just simply a logical extension of the Postal Service's mission. Let's see here. Someone else is saying that they tried some of the links on the information page, and the link to map on page 3 isn't working. If we have a defective map, a defective link someplace, we can go ahead and try to fix that. In the meantime, sorry to interrupt you guys. Go ahead, please.
For us, we cannot communicate enough right now, whether it's to our employees or to our customers and our partners. So that is that is the focal point of what we're trying to do. Yes, we have had some employees who have been impacted. We can't talk about where they are, who they are, because just like you have privacy with your doctors and in your businesses, we have to protect the privacy of our employees. But please be assured that we're following the CDC guidelines. We're making sure the employees that have been impacted are taken care of to the best of medicine's possibility. People that have been in contact with them, just like you would in your business, and like the states are saying, we're allowing them to work from home or to be quarantined. We're supporting our employees as best we can to make sure that they are not negatively impacted and that they don't negatively impact our customers. Because we're all in this together, and we will only survive it together. So, Tom, I just wanted to offer those comments.
So the person that had a problem with the link, I just tried it, and it brought me right into Puerto Rico, and then I just minimize or keep hitting the minus. You can get to the rest of the United States. And then once you put your mouse on the map, you can actually move the map around. And then Michelle,
and what I got when I hovered over that link was Control-click. So apparently, it depends on how your browser works. You may have to do different things, but it seems to be working.
Okay. Can we go to the last slide, please? So again, my goal as part of the industry, part of the supply chain, and working with Postal is to provide references for you so that you can provide your customers more information. Leo's done a great job of collecting data with Michelle. He has his own page set up. The alerts are out there also, along with a whole bunch of other information. The newsroom alerts from the post office are listed there. A special site around the virus. And then just a note, if you have a detached unit and someone becomes ill within your plant and you're shutting down mail acceptance within your plant, you can make arrangements for a contingency plan with Postal. And there's the link that just came out last night. Dale, anything to add on resources?
All your typical resources are out there, folks, and we're trying to add more resources. If you've got some suggestions, we'll be glad to take those and review those as well. It's great to have partners like Leo and Tom who are so passionate about some of these things and want to make sure that you have all your information. I would offer that one link that's not here is if you have a question that you need answered related to how we're dealing with something in the coronavirus crisis, you can send any of those questions to industryfeedback@USPS.gov. We ask you to put COVID-19 in that subject line so that we know that this is a question about that. and we can respond to that very quickly. I've already said that you can use that same address to send requests for the industry alerts. We will review your questions, and then when we get the answer, we'll put it back on our FAQ document, and we will also respond back to you directly of the question.
Let's see, I've got a question here, which is there, let's see, where I just lost it. The links, what's this? The links did not work on Chrome, but did on Internet Explorer. So I guess it depends on what you do here. Let's see here. I'm trying to see the other questions we've got. Let's see here. So I got something here following up on the essential services question, asking where can we find out in writing that we are an essential business? Obviously, the short answer is you can look on our webpage, on our COVID-19 page, to see the Postal Service's ruling. But as we learned yesterday, there was a judge, I think in Texas, who said basically, I don't care what the Postal Service says, I'm going to rule as I want. So because there is nothing that is binding, I guess, no statutory definition, you're going to encounter these things. If you're in, if you're in Minnesota, if you're in Florida, if you're in California, you're going to see the state or the city or the county establishing what it considers to be essential. I think Pennsylvania decided that mailing companies were not essential, whereas across the line in New York they are. So the Postal Service can't go out and enforce its opinion on a state, but it is a federal entity, and it is a chartered federal institution. So its position as being an essential service should have some weight with the states and other jurisdictions. But obviously, until someone tests that in court, I guess we're going to have to just do the best we can in making everybody play nice together. If you are in any state, though, or any jurisdiction, I would look to someone at that, probably the Secretary of State or the Secretary of Commerce or an emergency management agency in your state to see what they're saying. Hopefully, they're not saying different things that put you in an awkward position. There was a recommendation on a webinar we went on, someone else's webinar, PIA's webinar we were on yesterday, that said employees should be given a copy of the Postal Service's or the state's statement that an industry is essential, so that if they get stopped someplace, they're out at 2 in the morning or whatever, coming back from work, and they're asked why they're out contrary to curfew, they can show with their employee badge and this letter that they are working for a company that is considered an essential service. So, depending where you are and how crazy things get and how much a jurisdiction wants to enforce something, you may have a lesser or greater degree of difficulty in making sure everybody can get to work and back again. But that's sort of where it stands right now, as best that we can interpret it. So let's see, I'm looking for other questions here. The Pennsylvania, okay, this is the question I was just discussing, somebody from Minnesota. So we can share that information we got with folks via our website. A question came in, when will a recorded copy of this webinar be available? It will be available for all subscribers, I don't know, half an hour or so. It depends how fast the software can render it, and we can get it posted. And also the postal clarification within the CISA is under transportation and logistics. So if you look on our website, you'll see on our COVID-19 page, you'll see the CISA document, and it'll be underneath the heading of transportation and logistics if you wish to find a citation for that. Let's see, looking for other things here.
And Leo,
yes, Tom.
This is Dale. The Department of Justice and the White House have all made those statements that government employees are essential services. So that us trying to share that with our industry partners is only an extension because you guys, we can't, unless you get us the mail, we don't have anything to do. I mean, we don't have anything to promise. So.
Right. And of course, you know, much of what's being delivered right now is going to probably be related to the census, which is still supposed to go on. Local jurisdictions are sending out materials for voting, information about local health restrictions and so forth. So all that's important. If anybody in today's call has a colleague who wasn't able to sit in today, we have the second session, and an encore presentation, if you will, of this tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern time or noon Central and so forth. If anybody wants to have someone call in from their shop tomorrow. Right now, as best I can see, I have all the questions answered. So I want to thank Dale and Tom for taking the time out of their afternoon today to give us this presentation. We appreciate their help very much. I want to thank Michelle and Jennifer, who were in the background, making sure the lights stayed on and that everything worked for us. So again, until we talk to you again, please stay safe. Thank you again for calling in. Check out all these resources, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.